Captain Jake Rodriguez had always prided himself on being Earth's most diplomatically challenged ambassador. Not the worst, mind you, just the most challenged. There's a difference. The worst would imply he was trying and failing. Jake was more of a let's see what happens when we poke this with a stick kind of diplomat. Which is probably why they sent him to the Galactic Council space station to negotiate with the Zephyrian Empire. The brass figured if anyone could turn a routine peace talk into an interstellar incident, it would be Jake. They just didn't expect him to be quite this good at it. Ambassador Rodriguez, came the nasally voice of Ambassador Flibbert, whose species looked like someone had crossed a flamingo with a particularly judgmental accountant. How delightful that Earth has finally sent someone with, shall we say, appropriate expectations. Jake raised an eyebrow. Appropriate expectations? Well, naturally. Your species is still quite new to galactic politics. We hardly expect you to understand the nuances of civilized discourse. Flibbert's feathers ruffled in what Jake assumed was the alien equivalent of a condescending smile. Right. Civilized discourse. Got it. Jake leaned back in his chair, which was apparently designed for species with more tentacles than he possessed. So, what exactly are we discussing today? Oh, merely a few minor territorial adjustments, nothing your people need concern themselves with. Flibbert waved a wing dismissively. We've already handled the cleanup operations in your outer colonies. Quite efficient, if I do say so myself. Cleanup operations? Jake's voice dropped to what his ex-wife used to call his dangerously curious tone. Yes, some of your settlements were a bit too close to our shipping lanes. Safety hazard, you understand. We took care of it last week. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. Which settlements? Oh, I believe it was called New Brisbane. Lovely little planet. Was lovely anyway. Flibbert consulted his tablet with the enthusiasm of someone discussing the weather. The military exercise went perfectly. Very clean, very precise. Only took out the necessary structures. What necessary structures? Well, there was this building full of human juveniles, quite noisy. From what our scouts reported, an orphanage, I believe you call them? Dreadful waste of resources, keeping non-productive individuals alive. We did you a favor, really. The room went very quiet. Jake stared at Flibbert for a long moment, his face completely expressionless. When he finally spoke, his voice was so calm it could have been used to narrate a nature documentary. Ambassador Flibbert, I want to make sure I understand this correctly. You bombed an orphanage. An orphanage full of children, 200 children, to be exact. Well, yes, but as I said, it was merely a cleanup. 200 kids. I suppose the exact number is irrelevant. You killed 200 children because they were noisy. Flibbert's feathers fluffed with irritation. Ambassador Rodriguez, I hardly think your species is in a position to lecture the Zephyrian Empire on proper military protocol. We've been conducting interstellar warfare since before your ancestors discovered fire. Jake nodded slowly, pulled out his communication device, and pressed a single button. Hey, Earth? Yeah, it's Jake. You know that peace treaty we were supposed to sign today? Well, funny story about that. 3 hours later, in a bunker somewhere beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Patricia Iron Fist Murphy was staring at her coffee like it had personally insulted her mother. The coffee wasn't the problem. The problem was sitting across from her, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's houses, and somehow managing to look calm while discussing the systematic obliteration of an entire species. So let me get this straight, President Tommy Washington said, leaning back in his chair. They killed 200 kids because the kids were too noisy for their shipping routes. That's the gist of it, sir. Jake's voice crackled through the secure comm. Owen Flibbert seemed genuinely confused about why we might be upset about it. General Murphy set down her coffee cup with the kind of precision that suggested she was imagining it was Flibbert's head. Mr. President, I have 17 different invasion plans ready to deploy. We can have their home world glowing like a Christmas tree by Tuesday. Now, Patricia. Let's not be hasty. The president turned to the eccentric figure hunched over a tablet in the corner. Dr. Fizzlebottom, what do our options look like? Dr. Norbert Fizzlebottom looked up from his calculations, his wild Einstein hair somehow defying both gravity and good sense. Well, sir, we could go with the standard approach, a nuclear bombardment, orbital strikes, the usual Tuesday afternoon activities. But where's the creativity in that? Creativity? General Murphy's eye twitched. Oh yes, absolutely. You see, General, anyone can blow up a planet. It's been done. Frankly, it's rather past at this point. But what we have here is an opportunity for artistic expression. Dr. Fizzlebottom's eyes lit up like a child who'd just discovered the chemistry set. President Washington rubbed his temples. Doctor, when you say artistic expression, please tell me you don't mean interpretive dance. Oh, much better than that, sir. We could turn their entire atmosphere into a mild hallucinogen, or replace all their food with increasingly spicy versions of itself. Or, and this is my personal favorite, we could hack their planetary communication system and replace all their serious announcements with that song about the dancing lobster. General Murphy looked at the President. The President looked at General Murphy. They both looked at Dr. Fizzlebottom, who was now scribbling equations that probably violated several laws of physics and at least one treaty with common sense. Dr. General Murphy said slowly, "Are you suggesting we wage psychological warfare through the medium of crustacean-based musical entertainment?" Among other things, yes, you see. The beauty of the human approach to conflict resolution is that we don't just win wars. We make our enemies question their life choices. We make them wonder why they ever thought picking a fight with us was a good idea. We make them tell their children cautionary tales about what happens when you mess with humanity. President Washington was quiet for a moment. How long would it take to implement the hallucinogen approach? About 6 hours. The lobster song infiltration? Maybe 8, but only because I'd want to include the extended remix. Jake's voice crackled through the comm again. Folks, I'm still sitting here with Ambassador Flibbert, and he's starting to look nervous. Should I tell him anything? General Murphy picked up her coffee again, took a sip, and smiled. It was not a reassuring smile. Tell him Earth would like to discuss proportional responses. What should I say our proportional response will be? The President, General Murphy, and Dr. Fizzlebottom exchanged glances. Tell him, the President said, that we're still deciding between surgical precision and making his entire species regret the invention of spaceflight. And which way are we leaning? General Murphy's smile widened. We're leaning toward making sure this never happens again, to anyone. Ever. Dr. Fizzlebottom clapped his hands together. Oh, this is going to be fun. I haven't had a good excuse to use the Department of Disproportionate Responses in months. We have a Department of Disproportionate Responses? The President asked. We do now, sir. I'll have the paperwork filed by morning. Section 3. The Galaxy learns about human creativity. Admiral Betty Overkill Thompson had earned her nickname the old-fashioned way, by consistently using twice as much firepower as any reasonable person would consider necessary. Today, however, she was trying something new. Today, she was using her imagination. Fleet status report. She called out from the bridge of the Righteous Fury, Earth's newest and most diplomatically inappropriate battleship. All ships in position. Admiral, came the reply from Commander Davis. The atmospheric processors are locked and loaded. Dr. Fizzlebottom's special source is ready for deployment. Admiral Thompson nodded approvingly. And the broadcasting equipment? Ready to stream in high definition to 17,000 different alien news networks. The Galaxy's about to get quite a show. Down on the Zephyrian homeworld, Ambassador Flibbert was having what could generously be called a bad day. It had started when his breakfast had begun singing show tunes, continued when his government officials had started seeing rainbow unicorns in their morning briefings, and reached its current peak when his military advisors had called to report that their radar systems were now displaying Earth's response to their minor cleanup operation. The message was simple. You have chosen poorly. What do you mean, chosen poorly? Flibbert squawked into his communicator. And why is my cereal bowl giving me life advice? Sir, came the voice of General Zib Blett, the Empire's top military commander. I think we may have underestimated the humans. Nonsense. They're barely out of their planetary nursery. What could they possibly do to the mighty Zephyrian Empire? As if in answer to his question, every screen in the building lit up with the image of Admiral Thompson, who was somehow managing to look both professional and terrifyingly amused at the same time. "Greetings, Zephyrian Empire," Admiral Thompson said, her voice carrying the kind of cheerful authority usually reserved for kindergarten teachers explaining why hitting is wrong. "This is Admiral Betty Thompson of the Earth Defense Force. We understand you recently conducted what you called a cleanup operation on one of our colonies." Flibbert felt his feathers beginning to molt from stress. How are they broadcasting directly to our planetary network? "We wanted to take a moment to thank you," Admiral Thompson continued, "for providing us with such an excellent opportunity to demonstrate why Earth takes a dim view of child murder." "Child murder?" Flibbert sputtered. "It was a military exercise against an orphanage." "Well, yes, but full of children. The location was strategically irrelevant. 200 children. On 17,000 different worlds, in cantinas and space stations, in alien living rooms and diplomatic offices, the galaxy was watching and placing bets. The current odds heavily favored humanity doing something unprecedented, creative, and probably illegal under at least 47 different galactic treaties. "Now," Admiral Thompson continued, "we've given this considerable thought. Our initial response was to simply turn your homeworld into a small sun. But our diplomatic corps pointed out that this might be considered excessive." Flibbert felt a brief moment of hope. "So instead, we've decided to get creative." The hope died. "Phase 1 of our response has already been implemented. Your entire planetary atmosphere now contains a mild hallucinogen that makes everything slightly more colorful and significantly more honest. You should start noticing the effects right about now." Flibbert looked around his office. The walls were indeed more colorful than usual, and his desk appeared to be gently pulsing with what looked like a heartbeat. More disturbingly, he found himself with an almost irresistible urge to call his mother and apologize for that incident with the family hover car when he was 16. "Phase 2, Admiral Thompson announced, involves our Department of Disproportionate Responses. They're very excited to meet you." "A department of what?" General Zib Blett's voice cracked. "Oh, you'll love them. They're the people we call when someone needs to learn a lesson they'll never forget. They don't just win wars, General. They turn them into educational experiences." Colonel Chuck Chaos Williams had been having a boring week. As head of Earth's newly formed Department of Disproportionate Responses, he'd been hoping for something interesting to cross his desk. The orphanage bombing wasn't interesting. It was personal. Chuck had grown up in an orphanage himself. "All right, people," he announced to his team of reformed war criminals, creative psychopaths, and one very enthusiastic former circus performer, "we have a job to do. The Zephyrians have made a serious error in judgment, and it's our responsibility to help them understand the magnitude of their mistake." Lieutenant Sarah Mayhem Foster, who had once convinced an entire enemy battalion to surrender by replacing their ammunition with confetti, raised her hand. "What's the mission parameters, Colonel?" "Complete psychological warfare. I want them to understand that they're not fighting Earth's military. They're fighting Earth's sense of humor, and Earth's sense of humor is about to become their worst nightmare." Sergeant Mike Mischief O'Brien, whose specialty was turning serious military equipment into elaborate pranks, grinned. "Are we talking about the full treatment, sir?" "With the full treatment." On the bridge of the Righteous Fury, Admiral Thompson was receiving reports that were making her question her understanding of the word impossible. "Admiral," Commander Davis said, staring at his console in bewilderment, "I'm getting reports from the Zephyrian fleet. Their weapons systems have been modified." "And modified how?" "And well, their main battle cannons now shoot confetti. Their missiles have been replaced with party balloons, and their communication systems are broadcasting 'never gonna give you up' on an infinite loop." Admiral Thompson blinked. "All of them?" "All 7,000 ships, man. The Zephyrians are trying to conduct military operations while being repeatedly rick-rolled." And their planetary defenses? Converted into disco balls, Admiral. The entire planet is now visible from space due to the sparkly light display. Down on the Zephyrian homeworld, Ambassador Flibbert was discovering that commanding respect is difficult when your office has been converted into what appeared to be a cosmic joke. His serious diplomatic furniture had been replaced with bean bags. His official portraits now showed him wearing a party hat. And his personal communications device would only accept calls if he sang his requests in the form of a musical number. This is intolerable. He warbled, because warbling was apparently the only way his voice modulator would work now. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have conquered 17 star systems. We are not to be trifled with. Sir. General Ziblet's voice came through the comm system, accompanied by what sounded like a mariachi band. I have bad news. Our entire military communications network has been replaced with Earth's popular music. Our tactical discussions are now being conducted to the rhythm of something called Gangnam Style. Can we still fight back? Well, sir, technically yes. But our weapons platforms have been converted into what the humans call entertainment systems. Every time we try to fire on their ships, we end up providing them with what I believe is called a light show. Flibbert felt his last remaining dignity crumble. What do they want from us? The answer came from every speaker in the building simultaneously, in Admiral Thompson's cheerfully terrifying voice. We want you to learn. Learn what? Bet. And that there are consequences for murdering children, and that Earth doesn't forget. That humanity doesn't forgive. And that when you hurt our kids, we don't just get mad, we get creative. Colonel Williams' voice joined the broadcast. Ambassador Flibbert. You're probably wondering how we managed to infiltrate your entire military infrastructure, convert your weapons into party supplies, and turn your communications into a galactic entertainment network. The thought had occurred to me, Flibbert admitted, his voice automatically harmonizing with the background music. It's simple. You underestimated us. You thought we were just another primitive species you could push around. But here's the thing about humans, Ambassador. We don't just adapt to survive. We adapt to make sure survival is fun. This is warfare. This is Tuesday. 6 hours into what historians would later call the Great Humiliation, Ambassador Flibbert was beginning to understand that this wasn't a war in any traditional sense. This was an elaborate cosmic prank designed to teach the Zephyrian Empire a lesson they would never, ever forget. The revelation came to him as he sat in his beanbag chair, watching his military advisors attempt to conduct a strategy meeting while their uniforms had been replaced with what appeared to be Earth holiday sweaters featuring dancing reindeer. Sir, General Ziblet said, his voice breaking with what might have been either laughter or hysteria, I've just received word from our intelligence division. The humans aren't just broadcasting this conflict to the galaxy. They've turned it into what they call a reality show. A what? Entertainment, sir. They're providing commentary, keeping score, and selling advertising space. Apparently, we're currently the most watched program in galactic history. Flibbert felt something inside him break. Not his spirit exactly, but his entire understanding of how the universe was supposed to work. They're making money off of our humiliation. 17 billion credits so far, sir. The advertising revenue alone is enough to rebuild that orphanage 17 times over. They're rebuilding the orphanage. Oh yes, sir. They've already started construction. It's going to be visible from space, with a memorial garden and a very large sign that says this is what happens when you mess with Earth's children. The full magnitude of the situation hit Flibbert like a cosmic freight train. They weren't just being defeated. They were being turned into a cautionary tale. A warning to the entire galaxy about what happened when someone was stupid enough to attack human children. Get me a communication channel to Earth, Flibbert said, his voice barely above a whisper. What kind of channel, sir? The kind where I can surrender. I'm afraid that's not possible, sir. Why not? Because according to the humans, we're not currently at war. We're participating in what they call an educational experience. Surrender is not an available option until the lesson is complete. Admiral Thompson's voice filled the room again, somehow managing to sound both sympathetic and terrifyingly amused. Ambassador Flibbert, I understand you're having some difficulty with the current situation. Admiral Thompson, Flibbert said, I would like to formally apologize for our actions regarding the orphanage. It was wrong. It was inexcusable. We will provide full reparations and ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. That's very nice, Ambassador. But apologies are just words. We prefer demonstrations of understanding. What kind of demonstrations? Well, for starters, your empire is going to become the galaxy's official example of how not to behave. Every species that wants to establish diplomatic relations with Earth is going to watch this broadcast as part of their cultural sensitivity training. Flibbert closed his eyes. For how long? However, Ambassador, your species' attempt to casually murder human children is now part of the permanent historical record. Your great-great-grandchildren will be explaining to their friends why their ancestors were the villains in humanity's favorite bedtime story. Colonel Williams' voice joined the conversation. But here's the good news, Ambassador. We're not actually going to destroy your civilization. We're going to make it better. Better how? By making sure you never forget this lesson. Every Zephyrian military academy will now include a mandatory course on why you don't attack human children. Every diplomatic training program will feature a detailed case study of your spectacular failure. And every time your species looks up at the stars, you'll remember the day you learned that humanity doesn't just hold grudges. We turn them into educational opportunities. The room fell silent except for the soft sound of Flibbert's dignity making its final departure. The lesson, Admiral Thompson said gently, is that children are not acceptable casualties, ever, for any reason. This is non-negotiable. I understand, Flibbert whispered. Good. Because class is now in session for the rest of the galaxy. 6 months later, Captain Jake Rodriguez was sitting in his new office aboard the diplomatic space station, reviewing applications from species that wanted to establish formal relations with Earth. The office was bigger now, with better furniture and a coffee machine that actually worked. The view was nice too. He could see the construction progress on New Brisbane, where the new orphanage was taking shape. It was going to be beautiful, and very, very visible from space. Ambassador Rodriguez, his assistant, announced, "The Krillian delegation is here for their cultural sensitivity briefing." Jake looked up from his reports. The Krillians were a new species, recently discovered and eager to join the galactic community. They looked like a cross between a bear and a very polite businessman, and they had made the wise decision to approach humanity with extreme caution after hearing about the Zephyrian incident. "Send them in," Jake said, settling back in his chair. The lead Krillian, Ambassador Gruff-Talk, entered with what could only be described as careful optimism. "Ambassador Rodriguez, we are honored to meet with Earth's representatives. We have studied your species' history and approach to diplomacy." "Have you now?" Jake's tone was conversational, but something in his eyes suggested that this was a very important conversation. "Yes, sir. We have reviewed the educational materials provided by the Zephyrian Empire. Very thorough. Very memorable. Good. And what did you learn?" Ambassador Gruff-Talk straightened up. "That humanity takes the protection of children very seriously. That Earth's military capabilities are creative, and that it is far better to be friends with humans than to be their educational demonstration." Jake nodded approvingly. "Excellent. You've been paying attention. What else?" "That Earth doesn't just win conflicts. You turn them into lessons for everyone else. That your species has a very long memory and a very creative approach to justice. And that anyone who harms human children will become a cautionary tale told across the galaxy for generations." "Very good. Now, the important question. Do you have any children in your species?" "Yes, sir. We treasure our young ones above all else." "Perfect. Then we're going to get along just fine." Jake leaned forward. "Here's how this works, Ambassador. Earth is now the unofficial guardian of galactic childhood. We don't police trade disputes or territorial squabbles. We don't care about your politics or your ancient grudges. But if anyone, anywhere, hurts a child, They answer to us. What if it's an accident? Accidents happen. We investigate, we review, we work with you to make sure it doesn't happen again. But deliberately targeting children? Jake's smile was pleasant and absolutely terrifying. Well, you've seen the Zephyrian documentary series. Ambassador Gruff Talk nodded rapidly. We understand completely. Children are protected. This is universal law. Not law, Ambassador. Something much more powerful than law. This is humanity's promise. Jake stood up and walked to the window, where the construction lights of New Brisbane's new orphanage were twinkling in the distance. You see that building they're constructing down there? Yes, sir. It's going to have a plaque. Want to know what it says? Yes, sir. Jake turned back to the Krillian delegation, his expression serious. It says in memory of 200 children who died because someone thought they didn't matter. They were wrong. We remember. The room was quiet for a moment, and underneath that, Jake continued, it says Earth keeps its promises. Ambassador Gruff Talk swallowed hard. What promises has Earth made? That no child, anywhere in the galaxy, will ever again die because someone thinks they're acceptable casualties. That anyone who tries will discover that humanity has a very long reach and a very creative sense of justice. And that the universe is a much safer place when everyone remembers that children are not pawns in adult games. Jake sat back down and picked up his coffee. So, Ambassador Gruff Talk, knowing all of this, does the Krillian Republic still want to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth? Yes, sir. Very much so. Excellent. Welcome to the neighborhood. Try not to bomb any orphanages. We wouldn't dream of it, sir. Good. Because we've got a department of disproportionate responses, and they're always looking for new educational opportunities. As the Krillian delegation filed out, looking relieved and slightly terrified, Jake turned back to his window. Somewhere out there, Ambassador Flibbert was probably still trying to explain to his grandchildren why their species was famous for being spectacularly wrong about humanity. Somewhere else, Admiral Thompson was reviewing defense plans that included protocols for protecting not just Earth's children, but everyone's children. And down on New Brisbane, 200 small graves were being tended by people who would never forget that every child matters. Earth had kept its promise. The galaxy had learned its lesson. And everyone lived more carefully ever after.